Three of the Navy's most elite operators lay pinned in the dirt, their armor shattered by an enemy they couldn't even see. The brass called these rogue marksmen unstoppable. But they didn't account for a lone female sniper staring down her scope, ready to rewrite the rules of engagement. The Korangal air tasted like copper and pulverized granite. It was high noon in a nameless, jagged valley near the border, and the sun was a punishing, white-hot eye glaring down on the rocks. Down in the kill zone, Alpha Platoon was bleeding out. Chief Petty Officer David Miller pressed his back against the crumbling slate of a dried riverbed, his breathing ragged. A 7.62 millimeters armor-piercing round had just sheared through his left shoulder plate, burying itself deep in the dirt behind him. Beside him, Petty Officer First Class Jason Connolly was frantically trying to apply a tourniquet to another teammate's leg, his hands slick with crimson. The silence in the valley was heavy, unnatural, broken only by the supersonic, terrifying crack of incoming sniper fire. The sound always arrived before the report of the rifle, a terrifying reminder that the bullet had already passed or already found its mark. "I can't see them, Chief," Connolly shouted over the tactical radio, his voice strained with an edge of panic that rarely infected a hardened seal. "Thermals are useless. They're shooting through the rocks, I swear to God. We poke our heads out by an inch, and they take it off. They're unstoppable." Miller gritted his teeth, the pain in his shoulder throbbing with his heartbeat. Intelligence had warned them about a rogue element of highly trained mercenary snipers operating in the Sector ex-military ghosts who sold their crosshairs to the highest bidder. They were known simply as the Wraith Team. For the past 2 hours, these phantoms had systematically dismantled Alpha Platoon's advance, locking them in a crossfire so precise, so flawlessly triangulated, it felt like fighting a machine. Every flanking maneuver was met with lethal, pinpoint accuracy. They were fish in a barrel, and the water was draining fast. A mile away, perched on a limestone outcropping overlooking the valley floor, Lieutenant Sarah Hayes adjusted the parallax on her Mach 13 Mod 7 sniper rifle. She was a ghost in her own right. Earning her trident had been a brutal, unrelenting crucible of physical and psychological torment, but she hadn't just survived it. She had dominated the marksman course. Her heartbeat was a steady, rhythmic metronome, deliberately slowed to 50 beats per minute. While the comms chattered with the desperate, adrenaline-fueled voices of her pinned-down brothers, Sarah's world was reduced to the reticle of her scope, the wind reading on the mirage, and the math of death. "Alpha 1, this is Overwatch," Sarah transmitted, her voice a flat, calm contrast to the chaos below. "Hold your positions. Do not attempt to bound. I am scanning the ridgeline." "Overwatch! We are dying down here!" Captain Thomas Reed barked over the encrypted channel, his command vehicle positioned 3 miles back. "They have our boys zeroed. We need suppressive fire, or we need an airstrike." "Negative on the airstrike, Captain," Sarah replied smoothly, never taking her eye off the glass. "Danger close. You'll bury Miller and Connolly under a landslide. Give me 3 minutes. 3 minutes. In a sniper duel, 3 minutes was an eternity. It was a lifetime. Sarah slowed her breathing further. The heat radiating off the canyon walls created a shimmering mirage, distorting the landscape and making target identification a nightmare. The enemy snipers knew this. They were using the environmental thermal wash to mask their signatures. It was textbook, brilliant, and completely lethal. She began parsing the terrain, breaking the opposite ridge down into quadrants. A novice would look for a person, an expert looks for anomalies, a shadow that doesn't belong, a geometric shape in a world of organic rock, a reflection that shouldn't exist. She knew there were at least 3 shooters. The cadence of the shots tearing into Alpha Platoon's cover indicated a synchronized team. "Connolly," Sarah whispered into her mic, "I need you to show me where they are." "Are you out of your mind, Hayes?" Connolly snapped back. "I stick my helmet out, it's going to get ventilated." "Not your helmet. Give me a dust kick. Throw a rock over the left side of your cover. Hard." Down in the ditch, Connolly cursed under his breath, but he trusted Sarah. He grabbed a heavy piece of shale and hurled it over the left edge of their defensive ditch. Crack. Pff. A bullet instantly disintegrated the falling rock mid-air. Sarah's eyes darted. She didn't look at the rock. She traced the invisible trajectory backward. The spindrift, the subtle disturbance of dust on a distant ledge. There, quadrant 4. A shadow beneath an overhang, shrouded by a camouflage net perfectly matched to the terrain. The enemy sniper was tucked deep into a crevice, minimizing his muzzle flash. It was a brilliant hide, nearly invisible from the valley floor, but vulnerable to Sarah's elevated oblique angle. She adjusted her turrets. Wind from the northwest at 7 knots. Distance, 1,140 yards. The Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth, would shift the bullet slightly to the right over that distance. She dialed in the dope. "Send it," she whispered to herself. Sarah exhaled, pausing at the bottom of her breath, and squeezed the trigger with the steady pressure of a surgeon's scalpel. The heavy, 300 Winchester Magnum roared, bucking against her shoulder. She kept her eye glued to the scope, riding the recoil, watching the trace of the bullet as it arched through the thin mountain air. A second and a half later, the shadow under the distant overhang violently jerked backward. The camouflage netting collapsed, and the dark silhouette slumped forward, motionless. "One down," Sarah reported, chambering another round with a smooth, mechanical flick of the bolt. "But you just woke up the rest of them. Keep your heads down. The hunt just started." The sudden silence in the valley was far more terrifying than the gunfire. The remaining enemy snipers now knew they weren't just shooting fish in a barrel anymore. There was a shark in the water with them. Down in the ravine, Miller wiped a mixture of sweat and dust from his eyes. "Good hit, Overwatch, but the crossfire is still locking us in. If we move, the other two will drop us before we make 5 yards." "Copy that, Chief," Sarah replied. Her hands moved over her weapon with practiced, machine-like precision. "They're repositioning. They know I have the high ground angle." This was the deadliest game on Earth. Sniper against sniper. The first one to make a mistake, the first one to lose patience, would leave in a body bag. Sarah knew the enemy's doctrine. They would try to bracket her. One would act as the bait, trying to draw her fire, while the other maneuvered to get an angle on her muzzle flash. She couldn't stay where she was. Firing a 300 Win Mag kicks up dust and creates a sonic signature that seasoned veterans can pinpoint. Carefully, inch by inch, Sarah leopard crawled backward, dragging her rifle. The jagged rocks bit into her elbows and knees through her uniform, but she didn't wince. She relocated to a secondary hide she had scouted 20 minutes prior, a narrow fissure between two massive boulders that offered a narrower field of view but supreme concealment. She settled in, pushing her barrel through the dark gap, staying deep in the shadows. Through the scope, the enemy ridge was a ghost town. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The desert sun began its slow descent, elongating the shadows, changing the contrast of the entire battlefield. This was the witching hour for marksmen. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of light reflected off the ridge. A scope glint. It was glaringly obvious. Too obvious. "Overwatch, I see a glint. Bearing 290. Captain Reed's voice crackled. "Take the shot, Hayes." Sarah's finger hovered over the trigger, but her instincts screamed at her. The rogue mercenaries had been flawless up to this point. They wouldn't make a rookie mistake like letting the sun catch their objective lens, not unless they wanted it to be seen. "Negative, Command," Sarah breathed. "It's a decoy. They're trying to bait me into giving away my new position." She shifted her reticle away from the glaring light, scanning the darker recesses surrounding it. If there was a decoy, the real shooter was watching it, waiting for Sarah's muzzle flash. She scoured the rocks, looking through the thermal distortion. Nothing. Then, she noticed something chilling. A flock of mountain birds, previously settled on a ridge about 200 yards to the right of the decoy, suddenly took flight, startled by something unseen. Sarah tracked her scope to the bird's original location. A slight depression in the rock face. It looked completely natural. But as she stared, refusing to blink despite the burning salt in her eyes, she saw the faintest rhythmic distortion in the air. It wasn't the heat of the rocks. It was the heat of human breath, venting from under a thermal blanket. "Found you," she whispered. This shot was infinitely harder. The target was fully concealed, relying on the rock formation and thermal cloaking. Sarah had to thread the needle a shot that required the bullet to skim the edge of a rock shelf, drop precisely into the depression, and penetrate the camouflage. Distance, 1,320 yards. Wind had picked up, shifting to crosswinds swirling through the valley. It was a shot that most instructors at sniper school would call low percentage. "Impossible, even." "Chief Miller," Sarah transmitted. "I have shooter number 2, but I need to confirm he's alone in that hide. I need a distraction. Not a rock this time. I need a flare."
"You want me to pop a flare in broad daylight?" Connolly asked, incredulous. That's going to highlight our exact trench.
They already know where your trench is, Jason. Pop it towards the north ridge. Make them look. Doing it. A loud hiss echoed through the canyon, followed by the bright, sputtering red smoke of a signal flare rocketing toward the northern end of the valley. In Sarah's scope, the hidden depression shifted, just a fraction of an inch. The unseen sniper had reflexively adjusted his rifle toward the sudden burst of red smoke. In doing so, the tip of his suppressor poked out from the thermal blanket, catching a sliver of the afternoon sun. It was all the confirmation Sarah needed. She didn't just calculate the wind, she felt it. She adjusted her holdover, aiming not at the suppressor, but at the empty rock face a full 6 feet above and 3 feet to the left of the target, trusting the chaotic wind and the bullet's drop to do the rest. She closed her eyes for a microsecond, visualizing the parabolic arc of the round. She opened them, exhaled, and squeezed. Boom. The recoil slammed into her shoulder. Through the glass, she watched the impossible trajectory. The heavy bullet carved through the crosswind, cleared the jagged rock shelf by millimeters, and plunged directly into the center of the depression. A red mist burst upward through the thermal blanket. The suppressor dropped, clattering uselessly against the stones. "Shooter 2 is neutralized," Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave, cold and absolute. A cheer erupted over the comms from the pinned seals. "Hell yes, Wraith," Connolly yelled. "Stow it," Sarah commanded sharply. "There's still one left. The spotter or the team leader, and he just watched me kill his ghosts." Before she could even pull back the bolt to chamber her next round, the rock face inches from Sarah's face exploded into a shower of lethal shrapnel. A high-caliber bullet tore through the fissure, missing her cheek by a fraction of an inch, the supersonic shockwave temporarily deafening her right ear. The third sniper hadn't waited. He was already dialed in on her hide. Sarah threw herself backward, rolling out of the crevice just as a second bullet shattered the exact spot where her head had been. The hunter had just become the hunted, and the final rogue sniper was furious. The world dissolved into a deafening ring, a high-pitched siren of sheer trauma echoing inside Sarah's skull. The sheer kinetic force of the incoming round had pulverized the limestone face, turning the solid cover into a jagged shotgun blast of flying shrapnel. Warm, thick blood immediately began to trickle down the left side of her face, pooling at her jawline. A razor-sharp shard of rock had opened a 2-inch laceration just above her brow. She didn't reach up to wipe it. Movement meant death. "Overwatch." Chief David Miller's voice screamed through her earpiece, cutting through the ringing static. "Overwatch, report! We just saw the ridge explode. Hayes, do you read?" Sarah pressed her face into the burning, abrasive dirt, keeping her profile as flat as humanly possible. Her breathing was ragged, betraying the icy calm she had maintained just moments before. That wasn't a standard 7.62mm sniper round. The sheer concussive blast, the volume of displaced rock, the supersonic shockwave that was anti-materiel ordnance. The third shooter wasn't armed with a standard precision rifle. He was wielding a .50 caliber monster, a weapon designed to punch through engine blocks in light armored vehicles. To a human body, even behind solid rock, it was an executioner's gavel. "I'm up, Chief," Sarah whispered, her voice tight, a stark contrast to her previous composure. "Shooter 3 has a .50 cal. He's dialing in my hide. I am temporarily combat ineffective. Do not move, Alpha. I repeat, hold your position." "Damn it, Hayes, you're bleeding!" Jason Connolly yelled over the radio, catching the strained pitch in her voice. "Doc Gallagher is prepping a trauma kit. We're coming up the scree slope to get you." "Negative, Connolly. That is a direct order," Captain Thomas Reed interjected from command, his voice a harsh bark of authority. "Alpha Platoon, you stay in that ditch. If he has a .50, he'll tear you in half before you make it 10 yards up that slope. Hayes, you need to break contact and fall back to secondary rally point Delta." "Negative, Command," Sarah replied, her mind racing through tactical permutations at light speed. "If I displace now, he'll track my movement. He's waiting for the dust to settle to confirm the kill. If I try to crawl backward, he'll see the dirt shift. I'm pinned." The dust cloud from the pulverized rock was slowly drifting away on the mountain breeze. Once it cleared, the enemy sniper would have a pristine view of her mangled hideout. She had less than 60 seconds before the veil lifted. Slowly, agonizingly, Sarah shifted her weight. Her MK-13 Mod 7 rifle lay 2 feet away, covered in white limestone dust. Reaching for it would expose her arm. She had to abandon it. The realization was a bitter pill. A sniper's rifle is an extension of their own body. But survival dictated brutal compromises. She slowly drew her sidearm, a suppressed Sig Sauer P-226, though against a .50 caliber rifle at a distance of over 1,000 yards, it was utterly useless. Crack. Boom. Another .50 caliber round slammed into the rocks, this one lower, impacting the very boulder Sarah was using for defilade. The ground shook violently, vibrating up through her ribs. He was walking his shots down, systematically dismantling her cover. He wasn't just trying to kill her, he was erasing the terrain she occupied. "He's aggressive," Sarah muttered to herself, wincing as a fresh wave of blood dripped into her eye, stinging sharply. "Too aggressive for a spotter. That's the team leader." As the echoes of the massive gunshot rolled through the valley, Sarah noticed something entirely wrong. The sound. A sniper's brain is a supercomputer calculating variables: wind, drop, humidity, and acoustics. The first two shots from the enemy team had originated from the opposite ridgeline, an acoustic signature that bounded off the eastern valley wall. But the thunderous roar of the .50 caliber hadn't come from the east. The shockwave had hit her from a totally different angle. The report was too loud, the delay between the supersonic crack and the muzzle blast too short. The blood ran cold in her veins. He wasn't on the opposite ridge anymore. "Command, Alpha," Sarah transmitted, her voice urgent, dropping all pretense of radio protocol. "The enemy shooter has displaced. I say again, the shooter is no longer on the eastern ridge. He crossed the valley." "Impossible," Captain Reed fired back. "We have drone coverage at 10,000 feet. Nothing has crossed the valley floor." "He didn't cross the floor, Captain," Sarah breathed, her eyes darting toward the jagged peaks directly to her left. "He used the goat trails on the northern saddle. He flanked us. He's on our side of the mountain. He's not 1,000 yards away. He's less than 400. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the radio net. The dynamic of the battlefield had instantly, horrifyingly shifted. The enemy wasn't an untouchable ghost on a far-off peak anymore. He was a heavily armed predator stalking the same rock face Sarah was pinned on, and he had the high ground. Down in the kill zone, Miller looked at Connolly, the color draining from both seasoned operators' faces. "If he's on the west ridge with a 50, Miller whispered into the comms, "he has a plunging fire angle right into our trench. We have no top cover." "I know, Chief," Sarah said. She wiped the blood from her eye with the back of her dusty glove, smearing the crimson across her face like war paint. The ringing in her ears was subsiding, replaced by the terrifying, profound silence of the mountain. "He doesn't want you anymore. He wants me. He's coming to finish the job." She had to move. The dust was gone. The enemy sniper was somewhere above her, repositioning for the final lethal blow. Sarah left her sniper rifle in the dirt. She rolled onto her stomach, utilizing the deep shadows of the crevice, and began to low-crawl through the jagged rocks, moving deeper into the unforgiving terrain of her own mountain. The cat-and-mouse game had devolved into a brutal, close-quarters stalk. The midday sun baked the shale, radiating waves of blistering heat that blurred the jagged landscape. Sarah moved like a shadow, taking 30 seconds for every agonizing inch she crawled. Her uniform was torn, her knees bruised, and the laceration on her forehead continued to seep, the blood drying into a sticky, metallic crust. She was currently wedged beneath an overhanging slab of granite, completely blind to the ridge above her, relying solely on her hearing. The air was dead still. Every shifting pebble, every rustle of dry brush was magnified 100-fold. 400 yards. With a .50 caliber sniper rifle, 400 yards was point-blank range. It was an execution distance. "Alpha Platoon, status," Sarah whispered, her microphone pressed practically to her lips. "Holding breath, Overwatch," Miller replied, his voice barely a murmur. "We haven't taken fire since your position got hammered. He's focused entirely on you." "Doc Gallagher is ready to patch you up the second this is over, Hayes," Connolly added. "Just put this bastard in the dirt." "Working on it," Sarah said. She needed a weapon. Her pistol was woefully inadequate, and she had abandoned her Mark 13. But she still had her M4 carbine slung across her back, equipped with a low-power variable optic. It was an assault rifle, not a precision sniper platform, but at 400 yards, in the hands of a master, it could do the job. She unslung the M4, easing the charging handle back to check the chamber without making a sound. Brass glinted in the dim light, a full magazine of 5.56mm green-tip penetrators. It would have to be enough. A sound. Above and to her right, the unmistakable, hollow crunch of a heavy boot crushing a piece of brittle shale. Sarah's eyes locked onto the jagged ridgeline silhouetted against the blinding blue sky. He was close. Too close. Perhaps only 150 yards away now, hunting her through the rocks, relying on the sheer devastating power of his weapon to overcome any cover she might find. She couldn't peek. The moment her helmet broke the ridgeline, he would take her head off. She needed to draw him out, to force him into making a mistake, just like she had done to his spotter. But this man was a seasoned killer. He wouldn't fall for a thrown rock or a flare. Sarah looked down at her tactical vest. She unclipped her heavy ballistic helmet, gently setting it on the dirt. Then, she unspooled a length of 550 paracord from her utility pouch. She tied one end securely to the helmet's chin strap. Next, she took her high-visibility orange VS-17 signal panel, normally used to mark friendly positions for aircraft, and draped a tiny corner of it over the top of the helmet, just enough to mimic a piece of gear or a blood-soaked bandage catching the light. She placed the rigged helmet behind a small cluster of rocks to her left, leaving it barely visible through a narrow gap. She took the slack of the paracord and low-crawled 10 yards to her right, positioning herself behind a solid, chest-high boulder that offered a clear, enfilade view of the ridge above. She shouldered her M4, resting the handguard on the rock, dialing the magnification up to 6 power. She slowed her heart rate, 50 beats per minute, 45. She was a statue of flesh and bone. She gave the paracord a sharp, deliberate tug. The helmet shifted behind the rocks, the tiny sliver of orange fabric catching the sun. The response was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The enemy sniper didn't even hesitate. The mountain roared as the .50 caliber rifle fired. The sheer kinetic impact of the round struck the rocks, hiding the helmet, exploding the stone into a cloud of white dust and lethal shrapnel. But the enemy sniper had made his final, fatal error. To take that steep, plunging shot, he had been forced to step out from behind his cover, exposing his upper torso over the ridgeline. In Sarah's optic, time slowed to a crawl. The muzzle flash from the massive rifle was a blinding star against the rock face. Behind it, the shadowy silhouette of the mercenary team leader was exposed, his shoulder braced against the heavy weapon, looking down to confirm his kill. Sarah didn't flinch at the deafening roar. She didn't blink. The crosshairs of her M4 rested squarely on the center of the dark mass. She squeezed the trigger 3 times, fast. Bam, bam, bam. The sharp staccato cracks of the 5.56mm rifle echoed through the canyon, a stark, rapid contrast to the booming thunder of the enemy's weapon. Through her scope, Sarah watched the results. The first round struck the enemy sniper directly in the chest plate, staggering him. The second round caught him in the throat as his head snapped back. The third round impacted his helmet, sending him toppling backward, disappearing over the other side of the ridge like a felled tree. The heavy .50 caliber rifle clattered down the rock face, tumbling end over end until it smashed into the canyon floor. Useless. Silence rushed back into the valley, heavy and absolute. The wind howled softly through the jagged peaks. Sarah kept her rifle trained on the ridge for 2 full minutes. Her finger never left the trigger guard. Finally, she exhaled a long, shaky breath, letting the tension bleed out of her bruised and battered muscles. She lowered the M4. "Alpha Platoon," Sarah transmitted, her voice exhausted but steady, ringing out clearly over the encrypted channel. "Target neutralized. The ridgeline is clear. I say again, the invisible wall is down. You are clear to bound." Down in the blood-stained trench, Chief Miller let his head fall back against the dirt, closing his eyes in sheer relief. Connolly slumped forward, letting out a breath he felt he'd been holding for 3 hours. "Copy that, Overwatch," Miller said, a grin breaking through the grime on his face. "Solid copy. Doc Gallagher is on his way up to get you. Drinks are on us for the rest of your life, Hayes." Sarah leaned back against the hot stone, pressing a piece of gauze against her bleeding forehead, and looked up at the endless blue sky. "I'll hold you to that, Chief." Lieutenant Sarah Hayes didn't just survive the Korangal Valley that day. She proved that sheer tactical brilliance and unyielding grit can shatter the myth of the unstoppable enemy. Her actions saved Alpha Platoon and redefined what it means to hold the high ground. If you were captivated by this intense, real-life tale of a Navy SEAL's unwavering courage under fire, hit that like button, share this incredible story with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more gripping, untold combat stories.